According to the former president of the Central Council of Jews in Germany, Charlotte Knobloch, anti-Semitism is coming not only from the extreme right, but also, and very aggressively, from Muslims living in Germany, cited from Spiegel Online from January the 27th, which is the Holocaust Memorial Day here in Germany. However, in Germany, the focus in mainstream media concerning anti-Semitism has long been solely on right-wing extremism. Politicians and journalists still defend the concept of collective guilt and avoid discussing anti-Semitism among the Muslim population, although in later years it has become such an urgent problem that mainstream media as well as politicians can no longer ignore it. Many of the German Jews don't feel safe. 78% of them say that anti-Semitism has increased in Germany during the last 5 years, and a third of them fear being attacked. In the talk show Anne Will from January the 28th and again from April the 22nd, the question of anti-Semitism among immigrants is being raised. Migrants are socialized in a different way than native Germans, but everyone living here must reflect on the history of this country, Sausan Chebli, Muslim and the daughter of Palestinian refugees, said in the show from January. She called for a unity between Germans and immigrants in the struggle to overcome anti-Semitism. Every German, whether native or immigrant, must visit a concentration camp at least once in his or her lifetime, she said. This ought to be mandatory for everyone. After this statement, the talk immediately turned to the question of xenophobia. Esther Bejarano, a 93-year-old Holocaust survivor, didn't say a word about anti-Semitism among German Muslims. On the contrary, she stressed the fact that the refugees had had very bad experiences, and she rejected the idea of making a visit to a concentration camp mandatory. One of the participants in the show talked about the fact that his son had been attacked by Turkish and Arab kids at school because of being Jewish, and that this is happening at schools throughout Germany. But still, there was no discussion of Muslim anti-Semitism. Monika Grütters, Minister of Culture from the CDU, claimed that, quote, "we Germans feel ashamed when hearing about such cases, although the perpetrators have been Turkish and Arab school kids. The kids must have learned this behavior from someone," the man said, but instead of discussing the role of migrant parents, the participants in the show started criticizing German school teachers. According to Chebli, quote, "Muslims and migrants have never been more inclined to contact and work together with Jewish organizations and support Jewish initiatives than at present," without giving any examples. She, as well as the others in the show, preferred to blame the right and the AfD. The talk show from April 22nd was somewhat more differentiated. Will began by showing how a 19-year-old Syrian in Berlin was attacking a student with his belt for wearing a kippah. According to Ahmad Mansour, himself a former radical Muslim who is now working to prevent radicalization among young German Muslims, admitted that the ferocity of the attacks on Jews from Muslims in Germany has increased. Will referred to Merkel's interview on Israeli TV from that same day, where Merkel said that there are new forms of anti-Semitism in Germany, notably among Arab refugees. Will then asked Mansour if Merkel is just trying to cover up for mistakes done by her own government, or if anti-Semitism among Muslim immigrants is a real problem. She asked this in a way that signalized unwillingness and even excuse. Mansour answered that he and others working in this field are not able to reach out to young Muslims with a message, and that integration politics currently does not consist in clear values and societal expectations, and the fact that we do not tolerate anti-Semitism in our society. Will then asked whether there is too much talk currently about import of anti-Semitism and if we're forgetting anti-Semitism among native Germans. According to Katja Kipping, one of the two leaders of the party Die Linke, the left, in many of the countries from which refugees come, there is no information about the Holocaust, and Muslim fundamentalists in Germany use enmity towards Israel as the basis for recruiting new members. But there will be anti-Semitism in Germany also without the immigrants, she said. Germans are rejecting the guilt complex because of World War II and the Holocaust. Kipping defended the concept of collective guilt, meaning collective responsibility not to repeat the Holocaust. Certainly there is anti-Semitism among native Germans, but Kipping failed to mention the huge increase of anti-Semitism in Germany because of Muslim mass immigration, and she interprets rejecting collective guilt as necessarily being anti-Semitic, which is clearly false. Kipping is strengthening the national masochism, which robs the Germans of their national identity and national pride. Connecting this with anti-Semitism is intellectually dishonest. Kipping ought to deal with anti-Semitism within her own party instead, in the forms of anti-capitalism and hatred towards Israel. Mansour pointed to the fact that discussing anti-Semitism among the Muslim population in Germany is very difficult, and that politicians and journalists prefer to accuse the extreme right instead, making anti-Semitism into a purely right-wing extremist issue. For Mansour, the determination with which German politicians attack anti-Semitism among native Germans is non-existent when it comes to the Muslim population. The message that everyone living in Germany has to accept the right of the State of Israel to exist finds no acceptance among most refugees, he said. The Muslim associations in Germany who take part in the Islamic Conference flatly deny the existence of anti-Semitism among German Muslims. In Germany, the proportion of those who reject Jews is greater among Muslims than among non-Muslims, according to the Süddeutsche Zeitung from April the 14th. Already in 2002, a study made by scientists from the Technical University in Berlin showed that attacks on Jews and destruction of synagogues in Germany were mainly done by young Muslims, mostly by Arabs. In a study from 2015, 14% of Christians in Germany showed anti-Semitic tendencies, 20% of atheists, and 56% of Muslims. In another study from 2017, more than half of the refugees questioned, who came from Syria, Eritrea, Afghanistan, and Iraq, showed anti-Semitic tendencies. Thus, Muslim immigrants are clearly far more anti-Semitic than native Germans. The statement made in the talk show that 20% of native Germans are anti-Semitic is simply not true, and there was no mention of the percentage of people with anti-Semitic leanings within the Muslim community, which is a scandal. The discussions in the Anneville talk show show that politicians and journalists still do not take their responsibility in focusing on and criticizing Muslim anti-Semitism in Germany. Yes, Germany is importing anti-Semitism, and yes, anti-Semitism has increased enormously through mass immigration.